Hey, what is going on? My name is Kai, and today I'm going to be talking about how to make a one-pattern techno track on your Syntakt or similar device. I'm going to be going over elements of a successful pattern, song structure from muting, and I'm going to do an annotated performance where I play through the whole track and I put on screen some little text about what I'm doing. With that being said, let's hop into the song. And that's it. That took me a couple tries to get down. Still a couple errors, still relatively improvised. I don't have that exact build and, you know, break and then build again and then outro kind of structure perfectly memorized, so I'm kind of making it up a little bit on the fly. But that's the beauty about this type of song creation, is that you have all these layers that all serve a function and that all fit together to make various aspects of this track. And even when they're all playing together, they sound pretty good. And when they're playing just a couple at a time, they still sound pretty good. And that has a lot to do with sound selection and sound design. And so we're going to talk about those things right now in the elements of a successful pattern. Let's go. All right, so the first thing that I think for a successful pattern is what you need is good sounds on pretty much every track. So here, this first sound, huge thundering kick drum, and kind of that like backbeat thump that techno has a lot of. On top of this, I also have a top kick drum that sounds like this, so I can have kind of two levels of kick drum when I need it and when I don't need it. On this track and this track, I'll just play this one. Some kind of weird percussion-y sounds. This one has a LFO on its decay, which you know, makes these notes shorter and longer, which I think adds some nice variety to the pattern. This one is another percussion sound. And I usually treat these two as a block. I often turn these on and off by themselves, except for when I go into the break and come out of the break. Cool. What else do we have? Here, this kind of arpeggio sound. That's also pretty percussive, and I think it does a good job of cutting through the soup that gets created when everything's going. Let's see what else. This guy. This is the arpeggio. For real, not this, which I just called an arpeggio. This is the main arpeggio that I start the track on, kind of as an intro. And something that I do while I perform this is to then bring this in slowly later. After I mute it, I bring the volume down. And I check that before I'm going to bring it in to make sure the volume's down so that I can do kind of like this slow fade-in thing. You get the idea. Pattern number 7. This is some kind of big, high-pitched sound that I think just adds a lot of energy, and I save it until the second half of the performance, just so that I don't blow all of my tricks in the first half, and it's not boring. You know, there's still something to surprise you, even as the track goes on. This sound, I'm going to come back to this. This is a cool transition sound that I want to talk about after I go through all the other sounds, because it's a little bit more in-depth. We'll be right back to that. This is this huge, long bass note. I think it's just a 4-bar long note. And what's cool about it is that it has a fake sidechain on it. There's no sidechain on the Syntakt as far as I know. Sometimes you get that effect with the FX track because things cannibalize each other's headroom on there, kind of like what would happen in a compressor, but that's not really sidechain how I want it to be sidechain. So instead, this is faked with an LFO. This is timed. This is a sine wave. Timed, I mean it's in sync with the beat exactly. This depth is all the way down on the amp velocity, so what happens is when the kick plays, this LFO ducks the volume of this, creating a fake sidechain. You can hear if we bring it out, it just sounds like that. But it gives that good pulse. And also, listen to that tail. If I don't restart this note, like if I mute the patch so it doesn't trigger again, by patch I mean track, it has this really long tail, which I think, I'll play the whole thing again, just because the tail sounds so cool. Listen to that. Ooh. So when I let go of this, there's still more sound that comes after it, which gives the illusion of complexity. Let's see what else. This sound is a transition, so as these flash, it only triggers on 4 out of 4. Just another big sound that I use in a call and response with this sound here. And if I leave this on, you can tell there's a second note on 7 that plays simultaneously with this, and I rarely do that, but it's kind of a nice effect where, like, instead of call and response, they compete with each other for a second. This is a snare roll that's going all the time, so I can just turn on a snare roll whenever I need it. I often forget to turn it off, and so sometimes there'll just be a snare roll going, and that's one of the things that I need to practice most about this particular performance, is getting the snare roll started and stopped at, like, crisp moments. And then on this last track, the good old analog cymbal track, I have analog cymbal, or hi-hat, or whatever the hell. I promised to talk about this swoosh. Let's do it right now. This swoosh is just a white noise. However, it's set up in a couple different ways. This note triggers on pattern number 4, first 16th note. You'll also see on pattern number 1, what I'm trying to say here is measure 1, I also have another note that is set up on fill. So it only happens when I hold down the fill button. What happens, I'll show you. The normal non-fill version sounds like this, with a hard cutoff right there at the end. When I hold down fill, it has a nice tail on it. Now, if I have this playing and the track is not turned on, and I unmute it after that 4th bar note triggers and hold fill, I get only that sound that was our tail, but now it has a percussive start. So you can kind of get 3-in-1 transition sounds using this technique out of this pattern. A swoosh to a hard end, a swoosh with a nice tail, and then also a tail with a hard start, depending on how you mute this track and how you hold the fill button. And I think that's really cool because it fakes complexity in this patch. It sounds like you have 3 different fill layers or something going on when it's just really a Swiss Army knife, 1 fill layer. And that's it. All of these sounds, I think, are enough to create an interesting track for 5 or 6 minutes. I think another thing about why they're good, similarly to like this call and response thing, is that all the sounds don't play on top of each other at once. Like the beginnings of their sounds are staggered a little bit. This starts directly at the top of the first measure of the 4-bar loop. This comes in, let's see, oops. It comes in here. So we still have 6 16th notes for this main bass sound to have its own time. This sound only comes in at the end of the bar, and then by the end of the bar, I mean the end of the 4-bar loop. And then this sound comes in on the 1 of 2 and 4. So nothing hits on there. And so they're all kind of like, you know, playing nicely together. They're not overlapping each other too much. Also, another thing is that there isn't like a clear, complete pattern. Like even when ooh, that sounded cool. I'm gonna do that again. Sorry. Anyway, even when all this is going, right? Like, it still sounds like it has potential to go somewhere. And even if we have everything on, sometimes potential to go somewhere can be bringing it down to just like some really, like you could drop out of your super thick patch with everything going down to just this, or like just like this. And I think people could like hang here for a little bit. And so if I had done that improvised performance slightly differently, I might have ended up here, depending on what I felt was right for the moment. One more thing too is about like this one track out of one pattern idea. Something to consider when making one song out of one pattern is that genre matters. Techno is a genre where you can just like hang out with the beat for a while, and it's all about the small changes and taking you on a journey without like jostling you too much. Some genres are not as good for that. I think house could work here. I think like some lo-fi hip-hop type beat might work here, but something like pop or like a more complicated genre where maybe you want to have like your drum patterns really shift up. Like even like lo-fi hip hop might not work as well for this because like I think that maybe you'd want your kick drum to have like several different variations to it. And you could try to get there with fill and with like some conditional trigs and stuff, but this style of making music is really suited to trance, techno, ambient, etc., etc. Cool. So let's talk about song structure from muting. This is pretty much how the song, you know, how this pattern stays interesting for 5 minutes. I think to me, it's all about like ratcheting up tension and then letting some go. Like if you add a new thing, maybe take a couple things out for a second so that that new thing has space, have the audience pay attention to it, and then bring in the old things so that you're like kind of stair-stepping your tension up and down at any given time. And that it doesn't have to be like a steady rise, if that makes sense. You ever seen one of those like plot diagrams where it's like, here's your intro to the story and then rising action to your climax and then the denouement, you know? It doesn't have to be like that. It can be a little bit jerky, herky-jerky. But generally you are thinking of that rising tension, that break, that climax, that outro, all those kinds of things. Starting with a bunch of tracks muted means that you have a lot of places to go. So I have like this, you know, arpeggio. I start here, and I don't even bring that back for a long time. I transition right into drums. Just kind of like here, that's something that, you know, might come on later, that arpeggio. Remember it, we're gonna come back to that. And so I think that gives like a little bit of curiosity, like, oh, what was that sound? When are we gonna get it again? And then yeah, I just kind of add things slowly. We'll do that muting thing again, so that it's just the tail with a hard start. And I bring in the bass, this bass sound. We let it go for a little bit, but I muted that kick drum, you know? So new thing came in, old thing went out. And then I'll bring in the kick drum again. Maybe even with the snare roll. Oops, don't mute your hi-hat. And then I'll bring in this sound, the transition sound, to transfer us into the thumpy kick, because I have had that thumpy techno kick and techno backbeat thump thing muted. And so we'll let this go here. Hold down fill. And then we'll just hang out here for a while. Because on a big sound system, you're gonna wanna feel this thump for a little bit. We've been withholding it for the first minute and a half or whatever of this song, and then I'm gonna let people just sit with it for a while, because it's gonna be sick. It is sick. And then after a little while, I'll bring in the arpeggio thing. And then before I get too far again, I'm gonna actually bring everything down into a break, because we built up a little bit, and then I felt like we've been at a dancey level for a while, and then I'm gonna slow things down again, just to kind of get your interest back. And so then I mute things, I bring it all the way down to here. And then I'll take these out. And then I gotta make sure that 6 has its volume down, the arpeggio, and then I'll start bringing that in. And so now, you know, halfway through, I bring in that sound from the beginning that teased you a little bit. And then you can go ahead and start ratcheting things back up again. You know, bring in some drums, bring in the hi-hat. We'll do the bass again. We're basically doing what we did at the beginning, just with this sound going for a while, and then we'll get into the drop, you know? And then I think what I did in this performance is that I built up and I eventually took that out, and then I added in our, you know, that sound. So everything's still dancey. But then we added a new sound, removed that sound, just to kind of like bring things up, bring it down again a little bit, and it allows us some place to go again if I want to bring this sound back, which I did. And so now this is kind of like the biggest the pattern can get, because pretty much all the tracks are playing. And then I start bringing things down slightly again, you know? You might bring out the kick for 4 bars, just to kind of like lead into a transition, and then bring out the da-da-da-da-da arpeggio, plucky, hard sound. What do they call that? What's the sound called? EBM86. Okay, not a very useful description. I don't know what that means. But you know, bring that out, bring back the kick. Bring out the bass, we get that long tail. So it isn't kind of like bring something out, bring a new sound in, but in a way it is, because we get to hear that tail that we don't get to hear that often. Yeah, so it's just all about controlled tension. Use your layers to build somewhere, use them to drop somewhere, and then ratchet that tension up little by little until you're creating a journey. And also with this, you have the option to be as jarring or as smooth as you want. This swoosh transition has 3 levels of smoothness, kind of, and you can use it to great effect to kind of like surprise the audience momentarily, or to like foreshadow something, even if it's just like 4 beats ahead, a foreshadow with a swoosh of a transition or something like that, I think is still useful. Or you can choose not to foreshadow it at all and then have it change all of a sudden, because, you know, maybe you've been having a bunch of smooth transitions and now just to mix it up or for some effect, you know, you want to have a harsh transition. So all of that is available just by muting your tracks on this pattern, and that is how you're going to make an interesting song. You're going to carry people, you're going to keep their attention, you're going to keep them dancing, etc. for an entire song just with one pattern. As you're creating this pattern, just remember how all of your sounds fit together. Think if anything is clashing. If it is, just try to work it out so that either 2 sounds aren't playing on top of each other, or they're in different registers, or you pan things. By the way, everything on here is panned a little bit. This is not because it's the kick. This is panned way to the side. This is panned slightly to this side. This is panned this way. This is panned this way. This looks like it's in the middle. That's in the middle. This looks like it's panned a little bit. This is panned this way. This is panned this way. That's panned that way. I'm kind of running out of things to talk about. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about a 1-pattern techno track. So I hope you found that useful. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you're going to replicate this cool Swiss Army knife transition swoosh. Let me know down in the comments if you are inspired, or if you have more questions, or if you want to learn about anything else. By the way, I bought that Teenage Engineering EP KO2 133 sampler thing, which I'm very excited about. So whenever it ships to me, I'm going to be making some music with it, and I'm going to be making some videos about it. So keep an eye out for those. But yeah, that's about it. My name has been Kai, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.